Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, for wherever you're watching. Welcome to another edition of LinkedIn Live at 8 o'clock West Coast time. My name is Brian Galicia. I lead our global ISV business for Microsoft. And it's an honor and pleasure to have both Andy and Neil from HSO ProServe joining me today to talk about all the things related to AEC. And if you've never heard that term before, we're going to have Andy and Neil describe that. Of course, I know exactly what they do because they've been such a long-standing partner for Microsoft for such a long time. But we're going to have a pretty healthy dialogue for the next half an hour, just talking about their backgrounds, a lot of interesting things that have been happening recently that Andy and Neil will talk about, and we'll talk about different things of the outcomes they serve and drive to the professional services area. So Andy and Neil, welcome to this LinkedIn Live show.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great. So before we get started, little housekeeping items. So for those of you who've watched these LinkedIn Live events before, we'd love to have you do is either comment in the window, and you see the little streaming thing at the bottom. We'd love to know where you're watching from. We always typically get people not only just from Americas, either Canada or the US, but we also get people from Europe. It'd be interesting to see if we have anyone from Asia. We don't typically have people coming from Asia because it's pretty late in the day. But if you are watching wherever around the world, please put those in the comments because we'd love to do a quick shout out to you, and we appreciate you watching. Other thing you can do is if you like something that we're talking about, feel free to use one of the icons at the bottom to engage in the conversation, because that gives us an understanding of, is the information relevant? Is the content engaging or providing some hopefully useful value? The other thing that we'd love to have you do as well is that during the dialogue, if you have any questions to either Andy or Neil that you want to ask, feel free to put that in the window in the stream, and I'll pop those up, and we'll give an opportunity towards the end to ask Andy and Neil some questions. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So Andy and Neil, let's give the audience a little background of both yourselves, and of course the question I ask all the people who participate in these is, give us something of that. Is it on your LinkedIn profile that you'd like to share with people watching the live stream?
Excellent. So I'll go first, Brian. So this is always my favorite part of your segment, to get some interesting insight on some of your guests here. So my location on LinkedIn a couple months of the year is actually not Orange County, California, like it says. It's actually wherever we are in our RV. Last 6 or 7 years, once the kids got out of school, we packed up for the summer and hit the road. And I work from the RV in the summer. I've got my laptop, my Wi-Fi hotspot, and can pretty much work from anywhere. So, before COVID, that seemed like a pretty radical idea. But now that everybody's figured out they can pretty much work from wherever they want, you're hearing a lot more stories like that. But it's become pretty mainstream now these days. But it's a great experience.
So before I go to Neil, Andy, so what is your favorite spot that you've had your RV, that you've parked your RV and spent some time in?
We've got a lot of them. I would say probably up in Whistler. Whistler in the summer, it's pretty awesome.
I love it. Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm based in Seattle, and so Whistler is just a hop, skip, and a jump from the Seattle area, and that's also where the Winter Olympics were held. Gosh, I think maybe 12 years ago. I don't remember exactly. It seems like time flies, but yeah, that is one of my favorite spots as well, Whistler, Blackcomb. Yep. So Neil, we'll pass it over to you and give you a little background of yourself. And
I am clear across the country from you two. I'm in Boston, and pretty much have spent my entire life here in Boston. I actually spent my entire career helping AEC firms evaluate ERP systems. So this has really been my life. Something that's not on my LinkedIn profile. I don't know whether I'm proud of this or a little embarrassed, but I played volleyball for 3 days. So marathon volleyball, and we broke the world record. So I held the world record for a period of time. Nobody that I know really knows that. And certainly not any of my coworkers. And Andy, this is the first time you're hearing that. So you can evaluate me after this and figure out whether you still want me to hang out with you in HSO ProServe.
I knew I was in the presence of greatness, but in a different context.
Maybe just a little silly, that's all.
I love it, Neil. Gosh, I can't imagine playing volleyball for 3 straight days. I'm like, geez, I can't. I'm trying to evaluate eating, bathroom breaks, like that.
You get 5 minutes every hour.
Wow.
And so that's really your break. And so we did it, oh God, at my high school. And so we took that 5 minutes running into the shower, taking a quick shower, trying to refresh ourselves, getting back on the court, and figuring out whose serve it was next.
I love it. So before we go back to you, Andy, to kind of just jumpstart the conversation, I want to do a shout out to people. We have someone from Texas here. Thank you for joining. We have someone all the way from Portugal, Wanderlei, who of course is some part of what we do with our ISV Connect program. So thanks, Wanderlei, for listening in all the way from Portugal. Of course, you guys know Pat from the Bay Area, Northern California, and then Manuel, who's also someone that I know from the Microsoft side, also watching from your neck of the woods on the East Coast, Neil. So to get started, so Andy, talk about HSO ProServe, because of course there's been a lot of great activity happening recently. Talk about some of the exciting changes that have undergone, and what have you guys been up to? And maybe also for those of you who, to just set the tone, I mentioned the term AEC. Just describe also what is AEC when someone says that, like what is that acronym even stand for?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And so AEC stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction, which is one of the largest industries in the U.S. economy. And that's been a big focus area of us, working with architecture, engineering firms, environmental consulting firms, construction firms, to help provide Dynamics 365 solutions for a number of years now. So that's been a big focus of ours. Our business, when you ask about the exciting changes recently, we actually used to be the U.S. business of a Microsoft partner called SA Global, and we were acquired by HSO, which is now the world's largest dedicated Microsoft Dynamics 365 partner, with I guess over 1,200 employees around the world now. So to signify our ongoing focus in the professional services industries, our name within HSO is HSO ProServe. And so we're continuing to do many of the same things, and part of a great platform now. It's been a really, really great transition for us, and looking forward to continue to grow what we're doing in the architecture, engineering, construction space, as well as some of the other verticals within the professional services industry.
Yeah, that's great. Andy, this conversation, of course, we're going to focus on AEC, but give it a little bit of flavoring for people watching. What are some of the other, when you think about professional services, there's so many other things that you guys do such a great job of. What are some of the other areas that you could just briefly mention that HSO ProServe actually touches besides, of course, the AEC vertical?
Sure. So we like to say that any organization that runs their business in the context of projects and people is right within our wheelhouse. But as you know, within the ISV program with Microsoft, what we've done is built out specific versions of Dynamics 365 that really hit on the unique needs of some key industries or even sub-industries within the professional services space. So AEC being one of them, but we've also done very similar things across accounting firms, consulting firms, law firms. So 80% of what these organizations will do on a day-to-day basis is pretty consistent. 20% is unique, and that's really where we focus, is trying to close that gap so that again, our solutions really hit a home run in terms of the unique needs within those industries.
That's great, Andy. So that's a good lead in into the next question is, tell us a little bit about your participation. I mean, granted, before HSO ProServe, you became HSO ProServe, you being part of the U.S. arm of SA Global and being part of the program, what we refer to as the GISV or the ISV Connect program. Give us a little bit of kind of background of that experience that you've had so far about just being part of the Microsoft ecosystem.
Sure. So I guess our business model is a little unique in the Microsoft world, in that we are both what Microsoft would call an SI or a system integrator. So we're out helping our clients implement and support their business applications and all the related Microsoft cloud services. But we also are an ISV as well. So we build software based on the Microsoft technology stack. And again, that's really those industry-specific solutions that I mentioned a couple minutes ago. So we've been part of the ISV program, a managed global ISV now for a number of years. We actually entered it initially to try to leverage some of Microsoft's resources as we built out those industry solutions for Dynamics 365. And it's really given us really good access to Microsoft's product team and technology resources, as well as some of the partner management resources to help make sure that the solutions we're building and how we're going to market is being promoted across the different Microsoft teams around the world. So it's been a great experience for us in helping us grow our business. And it's really helped us innovate around some interesting emerging technologies. So one of the more recent examples was working with the Microsoft team to help build some AI scenarios into our solution. So when AI first started to get some legs, and you'd see it start to be infused into the business applications, as part of the ISV program, Microsoft had introduced us to some technical resources that really helped us understand, how these emerging technologies work, what some of the use case scenarios might be for them, and we were able to embed some really interesting capabilities within our solutions as a result.
That's great, Andy. Yeah, it's amazing the reach of how many times even our Microsoft sellers have said, like, gosh, it's been great to work with both of you because of the reach of the things that you guys do in professional services. So before we get to you, Neil, and go deeper on AEC and the solution, let me do a quick shout out to Evan. Thanks, Evan, while watching from another East Coaster from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. So thanks for joining in. So when you think about AEC in the scenarios, Neil, what makes it so unique? Like this thing that HSO ProServe, well, it has kind of evolved over time. What is the kind of the uniqueness of that capability of what you can deliver and the outcomes you can deliver to professional services organizations?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Well, to describe what we do and what AEC 360 is, we've taken that Microsoft Dynamics 365 business suite and we extended it and pre-configured it for the unique needs of an architectural engineering and construction firm. So we like to say it's the best of both worlds. It's that first-class, world-class cloud technology and business application, but it's also been purpose-built for the AEC industry. And I think it was probably best said maybe a month ago or so that the former vice president of finance for the New York Jets, who now has a similar position for an AE firm, a pretty large firm, told me that, and these are his words, football is a lot simpler than AE project accounting. So to describe a little bit about what we do, we like to say we cover the entire value chain of an architectural engineering and construction firm. So I think I can best describe it by walking around the project lifecycle. We have software applications that really focus on the marketing campaigns that AEC firms engage in. Then the opportunities that they chase, we help them decide which opportunities are the best ones to chase. Once they've won a project, we will help them manage all of the resources, subconsultants, all of the expenses that help them deliver that project on time and on budget. That's what their clients like. The solution also focuses in on the financial requirements that every firm has, but with the AEC world, it's pretty complex because you've got a number of different large firms that have offices and companies in various countries operating in various currencies, but the potential is for all of them to be charging a single project. And that's where some of that complexity comes in. And then at the end of it, we help firms manage all of their human capital, the talent management, how to bring good talent on, grow that talent, and the talent that designs some of the great stuff that you see all around you, the buildings, the bridges, alternative sources of energy like wind farms. So we're really happy with that. If I could go into just this best of both worlds concept a little bit more, because it really does make us unique and the solution unique in that you've got systems that focus on the AEC market and some of those specific things that I mentioned. and they've been around forever, some 50 years or so, but they'll never have that kind of base, that foundation of a tier one ERP platform. You've got tier one ERP players that come in to the market, but they don't have that real industry focus. All of those application areas, firms like Oracle or so. And we've got a client, Power Engineers, who was going to go from Oracle 11 to Oracle 12, but then they thought, well, that's just more of the same. So they looked at the solution that we provide, aec360, along with Microsoft. And that really, again, covered the best of both worlds. It gave them that industry point solution for the micro vertical, but also that world-class tier one ERP system that is Microsoft Dynamics 365. So hopefully I didn't go too long, but kind of in a nutshell, that's what we do, and that's what the software tries to accomplish.
No, that's great, Neil. So it sounds like a combination of, you have existing customers that are using legacy, or maybe that's not the right word, but using systems that they thought would address some of these outcomes, but then realize, well, it's kind of the same old thing, but they're not really addressing some of the needs that are propelling things in the future. But would you also say that you also have companies out there that are probably tracking things on spreadsheets or tracking things in a not more efficient way? Would that also be a fair statement for people watching and might be thinking, gosh, what Neil's describing is exactly what I'm experiencing in my professional services organization?
Exactly. That's exactly right, Brian. I mean, when you look at one of the biggest challenges that we see out in the market for AEC firms, it really boils down to user adoption. There are other ERP systems out there that really force the user to go into another application to accomplish their task, to participate in a business process. So you think about trying to get people to adopt a system, you really have to engage with the products that they like to use every day. And so you talk about some of the Microsoft tools that are out there. Everybody uses Outlook. Everybody uses Word. Excel's probably the most popular system out there, and now Teams coming into play. So I think our ability to integrate with all things Microsoft really increases the user adoption. It gets people to use the system, and sometimes it's without them even knowing it. I always like to focus on the role of the project manager. And you have to understand that for an AEC firm, the project really is the profit center. Mm-hmm. So you really need to manage all of the costs, and the project has to be financially viable. Right. If it's not, you can design great stuff or the most wonderful structures in the world, but you won't be around for long. So the project manager's role as really a business manager is something that is kind of foreign to them, but it's something that we really need to help them accomplish. And that's that combination that we have with Microsoft that really allows them to do that. And I focus on a tool like Microsoft Project Operations. And when you think about it, the latest release of that, it's a beautiful piece of software, and it's highly functional. It really does the job. So when you think about what an architect and an engineer try to deliver to their clients, it's that perfect combination of form and function. It's beautiful, and it really does the job. And that's a great example of how we, together with Microsoft, can help with, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we see out in the AEC market is getting people to adopt a piece of software. And we I think, best do that by trying to give the user the experience of using the tools that they like to use to accomplish tasks that sometimes they don't always like to do.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's so hard to get users to leverage a solution to begin with if it's not functionally helping them do their job. And that's the critical thing, is where I've seen in my years of doing business applications. It's that capability. It can't just be a reporting tool. It has to be something that actually serves the purpose of that end user trying to get their jobs done. So going back to some of the fundamental challenges, you were talking about that, Neil, but what has the pandemic done to some of this, from what you and Andy have seen for AEC companies? Like, what are some of the fundamental challenges, maybe during the pandemic, that may have surfaced up that kind of accelerated some of these pro-serve organizations or AEC organizations to come to both of you and your teams to go, gosh, we we're under all these different situations that have forced them to do a transformation. Are there fundamental challenges inside the pandemic or outside the pandemic that you can articulate or discuss that maybe could be valuable for the people watching and listening on, like, gosh, I have some of these challenges, but all those other things have surfaced up too because of the whole work from home and all the things that we've all been faced with?
Sure, I can speak to that. And just my experience is kind of what I talked about, the integration of a lot of different tools. And we talk about Teams, and people use that now all the time, and it's becoming part of their daily existence. It's one of the tools that has kind of allowed them to still conduct business, even though everyone is working remotely. So we've taken advantage of that, and inside our application, we have little links and hooks into Teams so that something as simple as filling out your timesheet. If you have a question for anybody, just ping them over Teams, ask a question about maybe the project that you're working on or the activity that you should be charging, something simple like a timesheet, then starts to become an easy thing to do because, again, you're using a piece of software that you've had to use to kind of survive what we've been confronted with for the last year plus.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Neil. That's great. So before we get into the next question, again, there's a reminder for anyone who's watching this live. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the IM window, and it gives us an opportunity of the 9 minutes we have left to address them and have me ask Andy and Neil and put them kind of on, not put them on the spot, but just give them an opportunity to potentially address any live questions that people have. So one of the things that's been so great to see, Andy and Neil, is just all these wind wires that come across, especially from you, Andy, because it's like clockwork. Almost weekly, I can always assume that there's going to be some great example of the transformations we're doing together to our end customers. So to many of the points that Neil was describing, and maybe for either of you, can you describe, I mean, you mentioned a few, Neil, but describe some of the other kind of examples where you've taken organizations from, I mean, this amazing transformation to get them to these great business outcomes to make processes and projects more efficient by utilizing both our technologies and our solutions.
Sure. So Neil, you want me to take that one?
Sure, go right ahead. I've been doing too much talking, probably.
Okay, so Neil alluded to a client of ours, Power Engineers, which is one of the largest engineering firms in the United States that was on an older platform from one of our competing platforms out in the market, and was faced with the need to basically re-platform, and they wanted to transform to the cloud. And that's something that when we talk about the pandemic, back to your last question, I think a lot of these organizations in the AEC space in particular are still using legacy on-premise technology. So all of a sudden, when the clock was ticking and all of a sudden people had to work from home very quickly, the ones that had invested in more of a cloud infrastructure made that transition much more seamlessly, and the ones that didn't said, wow, it's time for us to actually position ourselves to be able to run our business without disruption when these types of things happen. And moving to the cloud is one of the ways to do that. So I think that speaks to also the volume, like you said, Brian, of just the new clients that are really jumping on board with aec360 and the Microsoft Cloud to drive that transformation. Back to Power Engineers, though, again, when they looked at the fact they did need to do something, and they were looking for, again, that 10 or 15 year decision to a very strategic platform within their business. And they looked at what Microsoft's doing with the cloud, and not just Dynamics 365, which is a big part of what we're doing, but with the Power Platform. What we can do now with Power Apps and Power BI, from a business intelligence perspective in an AI scenario, there's a lot of really interesting capabilities that are available to these firms, as well as, more traditional, CRM and ERP and HR management capabilities. So really for them, the goal was, like a lot of our clients, they wanted to better integrate the different areas of their business, their marketing and business development, their project delivery, their financial management, human capital management, really bring that all together to drive better automation, better efficiencies to infuse productivity and collaboration into those processes as well, like Neil mentioned, with teams, for example, and then again, try to really drive more real-time insights, to their key stakeholders using, obviously Microsoft's established itself as the leader in data and analytics. So being able to leverage those technologies and again, give people the ability to make decisions much more real time were some of the key drivers for them. And that's really consistent with a lot of these firms across the different professional services industries that we're working with. The AEC industry in particular, they're all trying to solve, it seems like, very similar problems. And we've, like I said, together with Microsoft, built a great solution to help them do that.
That's great, Andy. One last thing to cover on this topic with Power Engineers, or maybe one of the other amazing organizations that we've worked on together. What's the average timeline when you think about maybe not just them or one in general, when someone may be listening to this and realizing, gosh, I'm in the same boat that Neil and you, Andy, described. How long does that transformation take from beginning to end? I know a lot of it depends, but in general, like for that situation, was it months? Like how long did it take for someone to realize that transformation to get them live and running so that their projects could be now running more efficiently and people engaging to what Neil described, marketing all the way to project delivery and project ownership? What does that timeline look like?
Yeah, you're right. It does depend. So obviously that example, that like I mentioned, they're one of the largest engineering firms in the U.S. They have a multinational footprint, so they're going to be on kind of one end of the spectrum in terms of that, the extent of that transformation and change, and therefore how long it takes. In larger multinational firms like that, it could be a 12 or 18-month process to implement a new platform like this. But we're also working with a lot of small and mid-sized firms that type of transition is not quite as extensive. It's not as heavy of a lift when you try to pivot a smaller business, and so we're seeing 6 months on the lower end. So I would say it's a pretty wide range depending on the scope of the transformation, the size of the business, and how much change management's required to pull it off.
Yep. Thanks, Andy. So a few more questions we have left, and again, as a reminder, if anyone has any questions for Andy or Neil, feel free to put it in the LinkedIn window, and we'll potentially address it with the 3 minutes we have left. So you touched on it, but describe like how is the partnership with Microsoft transformed now HSO ProServe and propel your organization kind of as the leader in the AEC or the kind of professional services space, Andy?
Sure. So I think if you look at it across a couple dimensions here, right, from a product development standpoint, and then from a go-to-market standpoint, I gave some examples earlier from a product development standpoint in terms of how we've worked with Microsoft and collaborated around building out new capabilities within the solution, leveraging some of those emerging technologies. So we really think in terms of the product itself, it is the most compelling offering in the industry. Because again, like Neil described earlier, it gives them a world-class Microsoft cloud platform, but also something very much purpose-built for their industry, and not a lot of vendors can say something like that. So we believe it's by far the most compelling alternative available. So from a product development standpoint, it's been a great experience. From a go-to-market standpoint, again, what it's allowed us to do is really leverage Microsoft's global sales team and being part of HSO now, with operations in over 20 countries, and really trying to scale on a global level, being able to leverage Microsoft's field team across the different regions across Europe and Asia Pac, for example. By participating in the ISV Connect program, we've had some great inroads with those teams and been able to work with them and promote our solutions within their local geographies as well. So that's really helped from a growth perspective too.
No, that's great, Andy. I mean, it is one of those things when you think about how big Microsoft is as an organization, that thousands of sellers around the world in all of our selling markets, to your point of leveraging the resources, not just from our partner development managers at a global level and in the areas, but also that great connection that you've established. And these win wires that, of course, that going back to that is such a great way, because when other sellers see that, because we take advantage of that too, we amplify all those great win wires internally. it really drives the broader awareness for them, people to pause and realize, oh my gosh, I have the same professional services organization example in my portfolio. I should reach out to someone in your organization to jointly go after it, which is great. So how do we, as we wrap up, how do people learn more? And you know, like what are some of your recommendations for people listening, and hopefully they got some useful insight to, one, understand some of the challenges and things that we can deliver together in a professional services or architecture, engineering, construction outcomes potentially. What are some of the call to actions or things that you would say people can do?
Sure. So certainly checking out our website, HSO ProServe without the E at the end, is a great way to just kind of better understand what we're doing in the professional services industry that we work with. We also have microsites like www.aec360.com that talk more specifically about those different industry solutions. I think you're going to put a link into our AppSource solution on the Microsoft AppSource site there. So that's a great way to learn more as well. And you can always feel free to send Neil or myself a connection request or a message over LinkedIn, and we can certainly connect that way as well.
That sounds good. Thanks, Andy. And so, Neil, any closing comments before we wrap up the session for today?
No, not really. I was thinking back to what Andy said about variation of trying to get firms up and running. It does run the whole gamut, but it's not something that we're not used to, let's just say. I always use the analogy of trying to change the tires on a moving car. And we take great care to our clients and helping them get on board with our platform. So no, that's it. Thanks for really having me on the broadcast today.
Yeah, no worries, Neil. And so it was nice that someone also put in there. That is the website that also can be found in that other LinkedIn site. So thanks for, I think it was Hannah that may have puts it in there. So any closing thoughts, Andy, before we wrap up?
No, I really appreciate you having us here. This was a lot of fun, and I enjoy watching these on Mondays. So we'll do it with the inside track on how they go down now. So thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, team. So again, thank you all of you for watching this live, or maybe you're watching the replay. The link to some of great resources is seen on the screen. Thanks again, Andy. Thanks again, Neil, and the HSO ProServe team for being such amazing partners. As I mentioned, we do this every Monday, as Andy alluded to, at 8 o'clock. Next week, we actually have a Treasury ISV on the call, SK Global, that I'm going to be joined by several people there going through, again, background and the outcomes that they can help deliver. So, Andy, Neil, thank you so much. Have a great Monday. Be well, be safe. And hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to do this type of event where we're actually all in the same room.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Brian.
Everybody have a great week. Take care.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Andy. Bye-bye.